Crime and Punishment is a novel written by Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's structured into 6 parts with an additional epilogue. This video is centered on the first part of the story. The main character is Raskolnikov, whom has committed a crime due to his circumstance of being terribly poor, and in so doing desiring to make a change towards his financial situation by acquiring monetary valuables that he had not earned in a manner that sacrifices his virtues. Do you have the patience to let your mud settle and allow your water to become clear? Lao Tzu. The story opens by introducing us to Raskolnikov, a student of law at the University at Petersburg, Russia, whom had been obliged to give up his studies temporarily at the moment due to his situation of being crushed by poverty. Raskolnikov lived in a garret, which is a top floor or attic room, especially a small dismal one. It was a tiny cupboard of a room, about 6 paces in length. It was so low pitched that a man of more than average height was ill at ease in it and would feel at every moment that he would knock his head against the ceiling. Raskolnikov presently had been intentionally avoiding his landlady as he was hopelessly in debt to her, and consequently his landlady, Praskovia Pavlovna, was planning to report Raskolnikov to the police as he hadn't been paying his rent and he still refused to move out of the room. Raskolnikov had been tutoring as a means to fend for himself before, but had given it up as the pay he was getting was so little it served no consequence in terms of his efforts and reward. He had thus began to spend more of his time thinking and desired to get a fortune all at once. That was what his thought process led to. Raskolnikov had not seen any of his nuclear family for about 3 years, and the last time he had communicated with them was about 2 months ago, which was with his mother, Pulcherin Raskolnikov. His father was dead, and his sister Dunya was about to be married to a counselor, Pyotr Petrovich Luzin, whom only intended to marry Raskolnikov's sister, Dunya, because based on her situation of not being able to meet up with her monetary needs, it will then cause her to be completely beholden, obligated to him financially. Raskolnikov was not in support of his sister's possible marriage to Pyotr Petrovich Luzin, and the thought of their union greatly tortured him. His mother, Pulcherin Raskolnikov, had informed Raskolnikov about this development of his sister's marriage recently through the means of a letter in which she revealed that she and his sister, Dunya, would be possibly coming to Petersburg in about a week's time, as Pyotr Petrovich Luzin desired to marry his sister Dunya as soon as possible. You see, Pyotr Petrovich Luzin was going to be at Petersburg as he had an important case before the Senate, and he was also working on opening a legal bureau at Petersburg also. In the previous winter, a fellow student who Raskolnikov knew, Pukarev, had left for Kharkov, but before Pukarev left, he and Raskolnikov had a chanced conversation in which Pukarev had given to Raskolnikov the address of Alyona Ivanovna, whom was an old pawnbroker, in case Raskolnikov desired to pawn anything. For a long while, Raskolnikov did not go to Alyona Ivanovna, the old pawnbroker, for he was still tutoring then, and managed to get along somehow. 6 weeks ago, Raskolnikov had remembered the address. He had two articles that could be pawned: his father's old silver watch and a little gold ring with three red stones, a present from his sister, Dunia, at parting. Raskolnikov decided to pawn the ring when he met the old pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna. He had felt an insurmountable repulsion for her at the first glance, though he knew nothing special about the old woman. Raskolnikov got 2 rubles from Alyona Ivanovna and then went into a miserable little tavern on his way home. A strange idea was pecking at his brain like a chicken in the egg, and very, very much absorbed him. Almost beside Raskolnikov, at the next table, there was sitting a student whom Raskolnikov did not know and had never seen. And with this student was a young officer. They had played a game of billiards and began drinking tea. All at once, Raskolnikov heard the student mention to the officer the pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna, and give to the officer her address. This of itself seemed strange to Raskolnikov. He had just come from Alyona Ivanovna's place, and here at the little tavern at once he heard her name. Raskolnikov could not shake off his extraordinary impression. And here someone seemed to be speaking expressly for him. The student began telling his friend, the young officer, various details about Alyona Ivanovna. "She is first rate," he said. "You can always get money from her. She is as rich as a Jew. She can give you 5,000 rubles at a time, and she is not above taking a pledge for a ruble. Lots of our fellows have had dealings with her, but she's an awful old happy." And the students began describing how spiteful and uncertain Alyona Ivanovna was, how if you were only a day late with your interest, the pledge was lost, how she gave a quarter of the value of an article and took 5 and even 7% a month on it, and so on. The students chattered on, saying that Alyona Ivanovna had a sister, Lizaveta, whom the wretched little creature, Alyona Ivanovna, was continually beating and kept in complete bondage like a small child, though Lizaveta was at least 6 feet high. There's a phenomenon for you, cried the student, and he laughed. They began talking about Lizaveta. The student spoke about her with a peculiar relish and was continually laughing, and the officer listened with great interest and asked him to send Lizaveta to do some mending for him. Raskolnikov did not miss a word and learned everything about her. Lizaveta was younger than the old woman, Alyona Ivanovna, and was Alyona Ivanovna's half-sister, being the child of a different mother. Lizaveta was 35. She worked day and night for her sister, Alyona Ivanovna, and besides doing the cooking and washing, Lizaveta did sewing and worked as a charwoman, a woman who cleans houses or office buildings. Elizaveta gave her sister, Alyona Ivanovna, all she earned. Elizaveta did not dare to accept another or job of any kind without her sister, Alyona Ivanovna's permission. The old woman had already made her will, and Elizaveta knew of it, and by this will, Elizaveta would not get a farthing. Nothing but the movables, chairs, and so on. All the money was left to a monastery in the province of N, that prayers might be said for Alyona Ivanovna in perpetuity. Lizaveta was of lower rank than her sister, unmarried and awfully uncouth in appearance, remarkably tall with long feet that looked as if they were bent outwards. Lizaveta always wore battered goatskin shoes and was clean in her person. What the student expressed most surprise and amusement about was the fact that Lizaveta was continually with child. "But you say she is hideous," observed the officer. "Yes, she is, so dark-skinned and looks like a soldier dressed up. But you know, she is not at all hideous. She has such a good natured face and eyes, strikingly so. And the proof of it is that lots of people are attracted by her. She is such a soft, gentle creature, ready to put up with anything, always willing to do anything. And her smile is really sweet. You seem to find her attractive yourself, laughed the officer. From her queerness, no. I'll tell you what. I could kill that damned old woman and make off with her money. I assure you, without the faintest conscience spring. The student added with warmth. The officer laughed again, while Raskolnikov shuddered. How strange it was. Listen, I want to ask you a serious question, the student said hotly. I was joking, of course, but look here. On one side, you have a stupid, senseless, worthless, spiteful, ailing, horrid old woman. Not simply useless, but doing actual mischief, who has not an idea what she's living for herself, and who will die in a day or two, in any case. You understand? You understand? Yes, yes, I understand, answered the officer, watching his excited companion attentively. Well, listen then. On the other side, fresh young lives thrown away for want of help, and by thousands on every side. 100,000 good deeds could be done and helped on that old woman's money, which will be buried in a monastery. Hundreds, thousands, perhaps might be set on the right path. Dozens of families saved from destitution, from ruin, from vice, from the lock hospitals, and all with our money. Kill her, take her money, and with the help of it, devote oneself to the service of humanity and the good of all. What do you think? Would not one tiny crime be wiped out by thousands of good deeds? For one life, thousands would be saved from corruption and decay. One death and 100 lives in exchange. It's simple arithmetic. Besides, what value has the life of that sickly, stupid, ill-natured old woman in the balance of existence? No more than the life of a louse, of a black beetle. Less in fact, because the old woman is doing harm. She is wearing out the lives of others. The other day she beat Lizaveta's finger out of spite. It almost had to be amputated. Of course, she does not deserve to live, remarked the officer. But there it is. It's nature. Oh well, brother, but we have to correct and direct nature. And, but for that, we should drown in an ocean of prejudice. But for that, there would never have been a single great man. They talk of duty, conscience. I don't want to say anything against duty and conscience. But the point is, what do we mean by them? Stay. I have another question to ask you. Listen. No, you stay. I'll ask you a question. Listen. Well, you are talking and speechifying away. But tell me, would you kill the old woman yourself? Of course not. I was only arguing the justice of it. It's nothing to do with me. But I think if you would not do it yourself, there is no justice about it. Let us have another game. Raskolnikov was violently agitated. Of course, it was all ordinary youthful talk and thoughts, such as he had often heard before in different forms and on different themes. But why had he happened to hear such a discussion and such ideas at the very moment when his own brain was just conceiving the very same ideas? And why, just at the moment when he had brought away the embryo of his idea from the old woman, had he dropped at once upon a conversation about her? This coincidence seemed strange to Raskolnikov. This trivial talk in a tavern had an immense influence on him, as though there had really been in it something preordained, some guiding hint. Presently, Raskolnikov was out of his lodge, walking aimlessly. He had on the previous day went once more to Alyona Ivanovna's place to pawn his father's old silver watch and scout the old pawn broker's home, informing Alyona Ivanovna that he would be coming again to her residence to pawn another item of his. Raskolnikov then made his way into an eating house or tavern. He drank a glass of vodka and ate a pie of some sort. He finished eating the pie as he walked away from the tavern. It was a long while since Raskolnikov had taken vodka, and it had an effect upon him at once. Though Raskolnikov only drank a wine glassful, his legs felt suddenly heavy, and a great drowsiness came upon him. Raskolnikov turned homewards, but reached Petrovsky Ostrov. He stopped completely, exhausted, turned off the road into the bushes, sank down upon the grass, and instantly fell asleep. Raskolnikov then later woke up after having a vivid dream, and then made his way through the hay market on his journey back to his lodging. Then, while passing through the hay market, he happened to see Elizaveta Ivanovna, the younger sister of the old pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanovna. Elizaveta was having a conversation with a huckster and his wife at the corner of an alley. Raskolnikov had just been passing when he then overheard their conversation with Elizaveta Ivanovna, revealing that she would not be at her home at 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. the next day, as Elizaveta was to meet with this huckster and his wife at that period. Raskolnikov had then suddenly, quite unexpectedly, learned that the next day at 7 o'clock, Elizaveta, the old woman's sister and only companion, would be away from home, and that therefore, at 7 o'clock precisely, the old woman would be left alone by herself. The next day came, and then Raskolnikov then made his way to the home of Alyona Ivanovna at around 7 o'clock, well prepared to carry out his plans. Raskolnikov rang the bell at the old pawnbroker's door, and half a minute later he rang again, more loudly. No answer. To go on ringing was useless and out of place. The old woman was, of course, at home, but she was suspicious and alone. Raskolnikov had some knowledge of her habits, and once more he put his ear to the door. Raskolnikov suddenly heard something like the cautious touch of a hand on the lock and the rustle of a skirt at the very door. Someone was standing stealthily close to the lock, and just as he was doing on the outside, this someone was secretly listening within and seemed to have her ear to the door. Raskolnikov moved a little on purpose and muttered something aloud so that he might not have the appearance of hiding, then rang a third time, but quietly, soberly, and without impatience. An instant later, Raskolnikov heard the latch unfastened. The door was opened, a tiny crack, and again two sharp and suspicious eyes stared at Raskolnikov out of the darkness. Raskolnikov then took hold of the door and drew it towards him to prevent the old woman from attempting to shut it again, which means to let someone in from the outside to come into the apartment. The door had a motion of push from the inside and likewise pull from the outside. Seeing this, the old woman did not pull the door back, since Alyona Ivanovna had pushed the door to see who was in front of her apartment, and then Raskolnikov had pulled it further wide, open from the outside. She didn't bother to pull the door back towards her to close the door, as she had pushed it front to look, and he drew it outside more. She didn't bother to pull it back, but she did not let go of the handle, so that Raskolnikov almost dragged her out with the door onto the stairs. Seeing that Alyona Ivanovna was standing in the doorway, not allowing him to pass, Raskolnikov then advanced straight upon her. Alyona Ivanovna stepped back in alarm, tried to say something, but seemed unable to speak, and stared with open eyes at Raskolnikov. "Good evening, Alyona Ivanovna," Raskolnikov began, trying to speak easily, but his voice would not obey him. It broke and shook. "I have come. I have brought something, but we would better come in to the light." And leaving her, Raskolnikov passed straight into the room, uninvited. The old woman ran after him. Her tongue was unloosed. "Good heavens! What it is? Who is it? What do you want? Why, Alyona Ivanovna? You know me, Raskolnikov. Here, I brought you the pledge I promised the other day." And then Raskolnikov held out the pledge. The old woman glanced for a moment at the pledge, but at once stared in the eyes of her uninvited visitor. She looked intently, maliciously, and mistrustfully. A minute passed. Raskolnikov then fancied something like a sneer in Alyona Ivanovna's eyes, as though she had already guessed everything. "Why do you look at me as though you did not know me?" said Raskolnikov said suddenly, also with malice. "Take it if you like. If not, I will go elsewhere. I am in a hurry." The old woman, Alyona Ivanovna, recovered herself, and her visitor's resolute tone evidently restored her confidence. "But why, my good sir, all of a minute? What is it?" Alyona Ivanovna asked, looking at the pledge. "The silver cigarette case I spoke of it last time, you know." Alyona Ivanovna held out her hand. "But how pale you are, to be sure, and your hands are trembling too. Have you been bathing, or what?" "Fever," Raskolnikov answered abruptly. "You can't help getting pale if you have got nothing to eat," Raskolnikov added, with difficulty articulating the words. Alyona Ivanovna then took the pledge from Raskolnikov. "What is it?" she asked once more, scanning Raskolnikov intently and weighing the pledge in her hand. "A tin cigarette case, silver. Look at it. It does not seem somehow like silver. How he has wrapped it up." Trying to untie the string and turning to the window, to the light, for all her windows were shut in spite of the stifling heat. Alyona Ivanovna left Raskolnikov altogether for some seconds and stood with her back to him. Raskolnikov unbuttoned his coat and freed the axe from the noose, but did not yet take it out altogether, simply holding it in his right hand under the coat he wore. "But what has he tied it up like this for?" Alyona Ivanovna cried with vexation and moved towards Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov had not a minute more to lose. He pulled the axe quite out, swung it with both arms, scarcely conscious of himself, and almost without effort, almost mechanically, brought the blunt side down on Alyona Ivanovna's head. Raskolnikov seemed not to use his own strength in this, but as soon as he had once brought the axe down, his strength returned to him. The old woman was as always bareheaded, her thin light hair, streaked with grey, thickly smeared with grease, was plaited in a rat's tail and fastened by a broken horn comb which stood out on the nape of her neck. As she was so shot, the blow fell on the very top of her skull. She cried out, but very faintly, and suddenly sank all of a heap on the floor, raising her hands to her head. In one hand she still held the pledge. Then Raskolnikov dealt her another and another blow with the blunt side of the axe, and on the same spot. The blood gushed as from an overturned glass. The body fell back. Raskolnikov stepped back, let Alyona Ivanovna fall, and at once bent over her face. She was dead. Her eyes seemed to be starting out of their sockets. The brow and the whole face were drawn and contorted convulsively. Raskolnikov then proceeded to go into Alyona Ivanovna's room, where he then found a good-sized box under the bed, at least a yard in length, with an arched lid covered with red leather and studded with steel nails. He then fitted one of the keys he had gotten from the old woman's dead body and unlocked the box, where he then came about a gold watch with various articles made of gold. Among the items in the box, some were in cases, others simply wrapped in newspapers, carefully and exactly folded and tied round with tape. Without any delay, Raskolnikov began filling up the pockets of his trousers and overcoat, without examining or undoing the parcels and cases, but he had no time to take many. Raskolnikov heard steps in the room where the old woman lay. He stopped short and was still as death, but all was quiet, so it must have been his fancy. All at once he heard distinctly a faint cry, as though someone had uttered a low, broken moan. Then again dead silence for a minute or two. Raskolnikov sat squatting on his heels by the box and waited, holding his breath. Suddenly, he jumped up, seized the axe, and ran out of the bedroom. In the middle of the room stood Lizaveta with a big bundle in her arms. She was gazing in stupefaction at her murdered sister, Alyona Ivanovna. Lizaveta was white as sheet and seeming not to have the strength to cry out. Seeing Raskolnikov run out of the bedroom, Lizaveta began faintly quivering all over, like a leaf. A shudder ran down her face. She lifted her hand, opened her mouth, but still did not scream. Lizaveta began slowly backing away from Raskolnikov into the corner, staring intently, persistently at Raskolnikov, but still uttered no sound, as though she could not get breath to scream. Raskolnikov rushed at Lizaveta with the axe. Her mouth twitched piteously, and this hapless Lizaveta was so simple and had been so thoroughly crushed and scared that she did not even raise a hand to guard her face, though that was the most necessary and natural action at the moment, for the axe was raised over her face. Lizaveta only put up her empty left hand, but not to her face, slowly holding it out before her as though motioning Raskolnikov away. The axe fell with a sharp edge just on the skull and split at one blow all the top of Lizaveta's head. She fell heavily at once. Raskolnikov completely lost his head as fear gained more and more mastery over him, especially after this second quite unexpected murder. Glancing, however, into the kitchen and seeing a bucket half full of water on a bench, he dropped the axe with the blade in the water, snatched a piece of soap that lay in a broken saucer on the window, and then washed his hands in the bucket, took out the axe, washed the blade, and then washed the wood where there were spots of blood, rubbing them with soap, then wetted the rag and cleaned his boots of the stains on them. Good God, Raskolnikov muttered, I must fly, fly. Raskolnikov escaped back to the premises of his lodge successfully, without being seen or approached. He then returned the murder weapon, the axe, back to where he had taken it without the owner's knowledge, which was at the porter's room at the lodge he resided at. Fortunately for Raskolnikov, the door to the porter's room was closed, but not locked, just as it was left unlocked when he had initially stolen the axe, with the porter still not present. Raskolnikov succeeded in putting the axe back under the bench, and even covering the axe with a chunk of wood as it was placed initially. Raskolnikov met no one, not a single soul, afterwards, on the way to his room. The landlady's door was shut. When he was in his room, he flung himself on the sofa, just as he was. He did not sleep, but sank into blank forgetfulness. We cannot avoid using power, cannot escape the compulsion to afflict the world. So let us, cautious in dictions and mighty in contradiction, love powerfully. Martin Buber. Love does not dominate, it cultivates. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.